This is Julian, aka Della Luz, for Inflow Productions. And today I want to talk to you about the difference between learning a skill as an autodidact and by being taught. Autodidactic learning just meaning that you teach it to yourself. Now, the most important distinction in my eyes is that learning something by teaching yourself is very frustrating. Especially if not uniquely if it's your first major skill that you're learning to teach yourself. You have no idea how the teaching process works. You have no idea how to research. You have no idea about the subject matter you're learning. So you're just kind of flailing along, grabbing at straws here and there, and trying to claw together an understanding of what is happening in the creative process that you're trying to replicate. Now, if you work with a teacher, at least with a good teacher, let's hope you all find those, they're gonna put you through a process of sorts. They're gonna teach you foundations, ideally, then they're gonna build on those foundations, they're gonna show you a way of doing the creative work, and more often than not, in my opinion, they are probably gonna give you a formula of how to do things. And here's kind of where the two paths diverge of self-taught and taught by someone else. That when you're taught by someone else and you're taught in a formulaic fashion, you kind of get stuck in that formula. You know how to create something, but you only know how to do it in one way. And you might find little variations on how to do it. You might change this and that, but it might seem like all you do is kind of the same. And I feel like there are artists out there that are heavily formulaic in their approach, and it kind of reduces their range of expression, I suppose. If you are teaching yourself, you are going to have to really start understanding the creative process you are trying to learn, because you have no other choice. I am self-taught myself for the most part. Of course, I did study music production, but they did not teach me how to write electronic music. It was just more of this isolated knowledge that I didn't really have any way of integrating because I didn't have a good foundation. And I've only in the last year or so formulated the foundation, and I'm still expanding on that base formula, trying to really grasp the intricacies, the foundations, the principles of electronic music production and music production as a whole. And that process was really frustrating because I had all of this knowledge, but I still couldn't do it. I still couldn't write the song. I still couldn't sound like the pros. Like, if I have all this knowledge, like, why doesn't it work? Am I like too stupid to do it? Do I just not have it? Is it too hard for me to grasp or to do? All of these thoughts were in my head for years. And only after I actually understood that to learn a skill, you work from the foundation up, and then you work with principles. did I actually understand why I was struggling with the process for such a long time? I was trying to brute force the whole thing to just, if I put more hours into this, it's surely gonna increase my skill and I'm just gonna write the best thing I've ever written. And I did develop some interesting creative strategies using that, and those are gonna be of value for me in my future musical career, but it was very frustrating, and on top of that, the process was very slow. I just talked briefly about the point that I developed a lot of interesting creative strategies that way. That is maybe the best part of teaching something to yourself, because you don't know how to get to the goal in the right way, you get to the goal in any way. And that kind of frees your mind just to try stuff until something breaks, and then it just works and it sounds unlike anything you've ever heard before, and it's great, it's amazing. I live for these moments, but I also want to have consistent results, you know? And I think you can feel where I'm coming from there, because nothing's more frustrating than putting time into your creative work and not seeing any results. Now, when you're self-taught, you can fall into the same problem of developing a formulaic approach. I think it's more unlikely, maybe depending on your personality, but in general, I think if you really have to think about a creative process, you're probably gonna at some point grasp the principles behind that process. So probably less formulaic. There's also a phenomenon in the creative world where people develop their own formula, which is a very unique approach to composition. For example, people like Steve Reich, Philip Glass, the pioneers of minimal music, they all created their own formulas and these little, well, not little, but these hugely innovative ways of arranging musical material. And then they spent their whole careers kind of exploring that. It was so fundamental, so unlike anything anybody ever did, that they kept like shuffling around and trying to put new variables in it. And you can do that, like that's a cool thing to do, but please only do that if you're really sure that that formula itself is already something that's really unique and worth exploring. So we were talking about formulas, but what about principles? You heard me say principles a couple times so far, but I haven't defined it yet. A principle is a foundational, structural view of a thing, a process, a larger, complex mechanism that's happening. For example, if you are thinking about the principles of effective movement, one principle would be to feel your body through every movement. That is one of the most foundational things you have to get really good at any physical skill. for music, a principle would be that music works in sections. You have different sections throughout a song, and you need to work on them separately. You need to, of course, have a context for all of them, but you need to understand how sections work, how they interact, how things work within a section. You have to really understand this kind of sliceability. That's the worst word for that, but the ability to differentiate musical material into its different parts, to work with it. That's a principle of music production. And no matter if you figure it out by being self-taught or by finding a really great teacher that's working with principles, this is the way to really learn a skill. You're not just copying what someone else does. You're not just repeating a certain formula of doing things. You actually understand the basic building blocks, the basic things that make music work, and you can play with those and express yourself within those, and again, shift them around, put them on its head. One example for that is in music, I know a little controversial, Kanye's album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. The revolutionary thing about that album is that during the time everybody was kind of writing songs in the same way. They had an intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro. For example, I don't know the exact formula they used, but everybody was basically doing the same thing. So Kanye grasped the principle that underlies the writing process, the principle of arrangement, and he played with the building blocks of that. And you can hear that in basically all of Kanye's work, that he's working with these really elemental building blocks and these really elemental contrasts within his own art, and thus always creating something fresh, something new, something other than what you've heard before. So I think I'll leave you with that. This is a lot to think about. You can think about your own process. If you're learning on your own, if you're learning with a teacher, is he teaching you a formula or is he teaching you principles? Do you understand the principles of your creative process, of your art? And again, join the conversation in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for being here, and I'll catch you in the next one.